For ASIO, is ideologically motivated violent extremism different from religiously motivated extremism, i.e. the question I'm sort of getting to is, does it require different types of techniques in terms of intelligence gathering and different types of case officers?
So the skills to penetrate and get insights, the core skills would be the same, but the people you're dealing with are different, and therefore you need different approaches and methods. You have to tailor it to your audience, so to speak. So they are different. At the end, we can have a debate about the language we've introduced now. Religion, is it an ideology? Under the criminal code, religious motivated violent extremism is actually called out, so we're separating the two. So the ideologies are different, the cultures are different, the people are different. That requires tailoring.
And I guess you can't go into too much detail on how you do that, but why change it, the language? So if someone's watching us today and we're calling it religiously motivated, the vast bulk, if not all, terrorism in a religious sense is from distortions of one faith, the Islamic faith.
There's no doubt that's been a dominant factor over the last 20 years, but over the history of this world, that's not actually true. Students of history will know there's other religions that have done vile things in the name of their religion, small subset of the religion, of course. So it's not actually true. And also the reason to change is, let me give you an example. So those who have this view of involuntary celibate, the ideology, the incel movement, that's not religious, that's something completely different and doesn't fit into the standard categories that we've previously used. We need terminology that helps us explain what we're seeing.
On the ideological front, there's been some criticism of the government for not prescribing more groups. So we have many religiously inspired groups prescribed as terrorist organisations. I think it's only one, SDK, which has been prescribed on the white supremacist or ideologically motivated. Why is that? Because Labor has argued publicly, they say that there's a number of groups that have links to Five Eyes nations, including ours, but only one group prescribed.
Sure. So there's many things in that. That group is going through a subscription process. I'm not sure it's there yet, but it's one that has gone through the process, and actually it was my agency that suggested that group should be considered for listing. But it's important where I sit, I don't focus on listing groups. My focus is on identifying the people who are going to conduct violence against Australians, and with our police partners trying to stop that. So that's my principal focus. The other thing to recognise is our law that enables the listing of organisations sets a very high bar to be jumped. There are very high penalties, high bar that's appropriate. So there are many groups actually that we consider, and we do consider these from time to time, that just simply wouldn't meet the legal threshold. We believe that group does, but that's for others to determine. I can acknowledge, as you suggested in terms of Labor's commentary, that listing groups sends a message to society that that behaviour is inappropriate. I don't think I need to list a group to send that message, although I can see the utility in that. The fact that I've been talking about it, and ASIO has been talking about it for many years now, and others talk about it, that's enough to say that behaviour is abhorrent and maybe is illegal, but that's a matter for Parliament and the laws we currently have.
And it's 40% of your caseload now from what you told us in the threat assessment, and I guess the message is you're watching anyway, you're watching them.
That's right, we're watching.
Prescribed or not, you're watching them.
That's correct, and last year there was a disruption. So there was an arrest made with people from that ideology. So it's out there. We and the police are having an effect. The other important thing though is you can't compare some of the groups that we're looking at today with ISIL or Al-Qaeda. There is no caliphate in the Grampians. You might have the National Socialist Network meeting there, but that group is completely different to ISIL. Yes, their ideology is abhorrent to people like me and most normal Australians, but is that stepping over the line and promoting violence and acts of terrorism? We've got to be very careful to compare the two. That's why ASIO's focus is we have that critically important job of understanding, is that just talk, or they really are going to go to action? identify those who are going to conduct harm and have them dealt with. And that has to be our focus.
What's that tipping point? How do you get there?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? It's a really hard one. Some of these groups we're looking at are very good. They understand the law. So when they're together in their clubhouses or when they're talking in the Grampians, they know what to say and do. They know not to step over the law. That may be because they're not actually going to step over the law and they're not going to conduct acts of terrorism. It may be they're just choosing not to disclose it. That's the challenge we have. That's the intelligence task we have. We've got to get close to them so we know what they're plotting and what they intend to do.
Now, in terms of getting close to the threat, one of the bills before the Parliament is this identify and disrupt legislation. It essentially gives agencies, from my understanding, capacity to take control of a perpetrator's computer to stop a crime happening. How do you and your colleagues in the intelligence community sort of balance that? Which makes a lot of sense, and a lot of people would support it if there's some atrocity happening online, from pedophilia or whatever else. How do you balance that with the right to privacy for Australians?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of ways I'd answer that. Privacy is not total. So in our society, there's always been the rule of law. I don't have privacy to the point that means I can conduct a crime without anybody knowing. Privacy doesn't give me that right. So it's important to understand that. Of course, privacy is important for most normal, lawful citizens. It's absolutely important, but it shouldn't mean the laws or the laws aren't there which enable law enforcement to do their job. So the legislation you're talking about, though, is not for ASIO, it's for the Australian Federal Police and the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission. But it is really important because the way the laws are today and the way technology is, crimes are being conducted and the law can't enable the police to do their job. I would think most normal Australians would think that's unacceptable. If you knew, for example, that in your neighbour's house there was some abuse of children or torture of an individual, you'd want the police to take action, and laws enable that to happen. But in cyberspace, the laws don't enable them to take action, and I think that has to be changed. I think they've got a clear argument for it. In terms of the proportionality, well, it's authorised by the appropriate people, and they have oversight, like ASIO has oversight. We are subject to the Inspector-General of Intelligence Security that has the standing powers of a Royal Commission. Tell me what other agency in this country has similar oversight. So if the Inspector-General comes here or his staff comes here and says, we're here, we want this, they get this. We can't deny them anything, and I welcome that. I think that's actually a good part of how I can satisfy citizens of this country that we do things which are legal and we do things which are proportionate to the threat.
Looking to the future, what are you worried about in terms of forward threats?
Sure. So threats to life, terrorism is still a problem. Espionage and foreign interference will be this country's principal security concern if things don't change. Moving forward though, and in line with that, ASIO has other heads of security, so terrorism, politically motivated violence, promotion of communal violence, that's terrorism, espionage, foreign interference, attacks on defence systems, border security, and sabotage. Sabotage is what it says on the tin. And if we think about global tensions and if we think about the digital world in which we live, we are concerned that you could see the placement of malicious software on networks that could be there for disruption or sabotage. And that is of real concern. Now, that's a concern and that's something we turn our mind to, but I can also reassure you and your viewers that there are actions being taken across government to address those issues. The security of critical infrastructure legislation is an important piece of law that, working with the private sector, will help them and help government identify and manage that risk, because disruption is possible in this digital connected age.
And in that context, you know, the sabotage prospect and the emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, that sort of thing, what will intelligence gathering look like in the future?
Yeah, so humans will always be key to this. You can throw your mind to sci-fi when it says the computers are controlling everything. I think if that happens, humanity is doomed. Others more greater than I have said that before. So humans, for me, in the either conducting espionage or stopping it will be a key. Remember, when we're hacked for stealing of our secrets or placement of software that can disrupt, yeah, there are humans at the keyboards at the other end. But of course, computers and computer programs, machine learning, fancy algorithms can actually give you an edge in doing both good and bad, and we have to focus in on that. We are certainly embracing artificial intelligence, machine learning and data analytics. Absolutely need that so we can be more proportionate and targeted. At the same time, we know criminals and nation states can also use it to target and achieve their goals. It's always poacher, gamekeeper, same thing. We'll be mindful of it. It will help us. It will also be a threat for us, but I think we've got the handle on it.
And finally, we finished where we began in a way, because it's about tapping into people's sense of national interest. How do you get the right people to do the sort of thing you're talking about? Because it takes great capacity and individuals who elsewhere could earn lots of dollars.
So when I talked about staff in my organisation and ASD and others, they're here to make a difference, they're not here to make a buck. There is something special about the motivation of you can see the work you do and how it contributes positively to this country and the safety of your fellow Australians. There's something very powerful in that. How we get them, well, that's why I'm talking openly. We're trying to explain more without giving away our secrets, because if we give away our secrets, we won't be as good as we can be. But people are smart, so we look for clever, curious people who are creative, innovative problem solvers, and actually from all walks of life. We have musicians, electricians, tradies, engineers, doctors, nurses, scientists, and Kieran, even journalists. So you could have a bright future in this organisation. Of course, we couldn't deploy you on a covert operation because you're too well known, but we look for a wide variety of people and talking about what we do. We recently did a campaign to expose more about what happens in this building from a technology point of view, and the interest that we got from Australians was off the roof, and that is brilliant because that means we can get the best and the brightest who can come here and make a difference.
Director-General of Security Mike Burgess, very much appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thanks, Kieran.